Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about shoulders because we all have them and we all notice them from time to time, right? So we have Lois today with us, and we're talking about some tendonitis feelings in the shoulders that come and go. Like I hear a lot of questions a lot of times, like how much weight is safe to lift? What motions are safe to do? How much should I challenge myself? Do those all sound like things that are on your mind, Lois, with your shoulders?
Totally. Because
Yeah.
there are all these weighty, lifty things that I want to do because they're
Mm-hmm.
fun and they make me feel like Superman, woman,
Feels good to be
whatever.
able to do it,
Yeah,
right?
it
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
absolutely. And honestly, over the years, like I've been a physical therapist for 28 years now. So initially, like when I was first working with people, I didn't have the same understanding and the same experience. No one does in the beginning of their career, but in school and in kind of more traditional programs, we're taught to isolate muscle groups in when doing shoulder rehabilitation and things like that, like stuff like this. And then what really started to change my thinking was two things. One is I have some tears in my rotator cuff from a car accident that I was in decades ago. So I feel it. Like I know what it feels like to have shoulders that talk to you. And it's never been a case for me that I would have considered a surgery. Surgeries are really meant for if a tendon is completely ruptured, like complete full thickness tear. It's not attached to the bone anymore. Anything that is less than that is much better to deal with from a physical therapy, functional awareness perspective. So that's just to say that. The other thing that really began to change the way I looked about shoulders was when I I did my fellowship with the Gray Institute, and that's for more functional movement. And then I taught for them. And what we really, really emphasize with functional movement is that, and we could do there are studies that would show that if I'm trying to rehabilitate a specific rotator cuff tendon, and I hook myself up to an EMG machine and I do this over and over and over, it makes the muscle more, it fires it, of course, but it's not teaching it to work with the rest of the body in the way that we function in life. And so it can be helpful, of course. People have gone through those things, but if we're not thinking about how the shoulder actually works in our daily lives, like how often do we do this? Like you're not going to cook like that right now, right? If you need to reach something, you're going to take a step, you're going to move, you're going to have your whole body involved. So when we are thinking about the health of our shoulders, it's really important to consider all of the function that the shoulder is meant to have and all of the muscles that are attached. So I'm going to try to do a little screen share here, and I hope that this program is going to cooperate today. Can you
Perfect.
see the anatomy
Perfect.
guy here? Okay. All right. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, I hope, on, this is where it works better on an iPad, unfortunately. Okay. All right, so we've got our, it's really going to spin around. I'm going to start in the back here, okay? Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove, hopefully I'm going to remove, oh, it's not going to let me do it. I'm so bummed out. What I was hoping to be able to do is to remove the layers of the muscle, but I think this program is freezing, so that's unfortunate.
Oh, Phil.
Let me close it out and I'll start it back up. See if that helps. So each shoulder blade, right? And Lois, if you don't mind me mentioning one thing we talked about before I hit record, is you have had some history of some problems back here along the shoulder blade, right? So each of our shoulder blades that are really smaller than our hands, they're not even as big as our hands, but they're back there on our rib cage, and they have 17 different muscles that attach to them. So some on this side, some on this side, some on the edges, some on the edges. And if you can picture what we do to our shoulder blades when we're rolled forward like this most of the time, right? So we're really lengthening out a whole series of muscles, keeping them in an elongated position, which isn't ideal. And then we're shortening other muscle groups and keeping those in a more shortened position, okay? And so our muscles are going to start to think that that's the shape they're supposed to take, and they live more in those states. Like whatever state we have them in for long periods of time, they sort of adapt to those lengths and those states. Does that make sense?
Total.
Okay. So
Yep.
then when we go and we do something like this, like we reach back behind ourselves like this, if those muscles aren't ready to help slide the shoulder blade back, like when we think of the shoulder, we think of just this. The shoulder, the key to the shoulder is the shoulder blade, because all of those, like there wouldn't have 17 muscles attached to it if it didn't power our arm and it didn't allow us to make these movements that we make. So when we have pain like up in here that a lot of people have, and I think that might be where
Which
you
I also
experience
have
some
right now too.
discomfort.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing that is most likely happening when we have that discomfort up in here with certain movements, probably not every movement, but certain movements, is that the shoulder blade is not in its like nice reactive state, meaning that some of those muscles are tighter. We get the knots up here. Some of them are kind of looser and longer. Some of, right? Is that? And then when we go to do a move like this, the shoulder blade doesn't retract back along the rib cage in an efficient way, because we're probably more like this for periods of time, right? We don't even notice we're doing it, but we're looking down, we're driving, we're forward. So then if those muscles aren't ready to help pull that shoulder blade back out of the way, then what happens is we get a pinch happening somewhere along the glenohumeral joint, where the ball and the socket of the shoulder meet. The socket is part of the shoulder blade. The ball is part of this long arm bone here. So it's just like in the hip. I know we talk about this in class sometimes, but if we experience a sharp sensation here or an achy sensation down into the arm that many of us have from time to time, then most likely what's happening is, instead of there being some nice space, and we'll talk about space in a minute, instead of there being some nice space between that ball and socket, when we go to move, and if the shoulder blade and the muscles around it are off kilter, right, or not really pulling it back and helping power that motion, then we get a pinch instead of a glide.
Right.
Okay. So
you want to teach the shoulder how to do that glidey thing again.
Exactly. It's very important. Yes. And here's the thing about the way that muscles are set up around the body. And I'm hoping I can get this app to work again, but if we don't, it's okay. The way that, is it showing up again? Lois, by any
Not
chance?
yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right. Let me go share here. Okay.
Yep. I see
All
it.
right. I think he's back. Okay. All right. So the way that all of the muscles do all this beautiful layering and wrapping, part of that process, part of that structure around a joint is when those muscles are resilient and strong, right? Not sort of squishy and weak or hard and tight. When they're resilient and strong, they create space in the joints that they connect to. It's this natural tensional relationship that happens with the muscles and the bones, that if things are working nicely, we're strong, we're mobile, then what that does is it kind of, can you still see me too in the, okay. What that does is it opens up and creates more space between the bones. And then that allows for much healthier, fluid, glidey kind of movements.
No, what I think is that all those squats and lunges with weights that you had us do fixed my knees forever. Because now it used to be contra malaysia, total bone on bone also. And now I can run upstairs, flights of stairs. And
so you created more space. Like, is that that's a new kind of concept for most people, to think about muscles in that way. I was not taught that in physical therapy school. This is more of a, it's newer information, and it's really amazing information because it opens up so many possibilities for people with arthritis and with joint pain, and just to understand that kind of functional strengthening. Now, if we're talking about the knee, right? And you can, I'm going to stop sharing this. I don't think we're even going to need him today. If we're talking about the knee, and let's say you were just in a gym, which is wonderful, but maybe you were trying to help that knee by sitting on one of those machines and doing those quad extensions, things like that, laying on our belly and doing the hamstring pulls like that.
I think I know what you're going to say. You're firing specific muscles in specific movements.
Exactly.
And not a bunch of functional movements together that you need to do in order to create that space.
We need that. We need it for the space. Exactly. And if we're isolating, if we're strengthening in isolation, we can get like good, bulky looking, strong looking muscles, but they're not working in integration with each other. And that's what we need around those joints to create that space.
So what I want to do is do with my shoulder what you helped me do with my knees.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we do that, right? So certainly your participation in class, and anybody who's watching this too, is a big step in the right direction. Now, another thing that we could, and we did a little bit of this yesterday, but you weren't there yesterday. So one thing that is scary to do when we're concerned about our shoulders is to think about heavy weights, right? It's kind of daunting and scary, and we're not sure if it's really the right thing to do. However, most likely, one thing that I do, I try to take a heavy weight. Like, I'm not doing it right now, but I'll try to have like a 15-pound weight, or maybe even a 20-pound weight. Whoa. Okay. And then I just, nice and easy, just try to let my hips move, but do just kind of maybe 20 or 30, or, I'd build up to some number like that. But just that that act of and we don't want to do that if it hurts, okay? But if we can get you, I think you would be surprised that you could do probably a heavier weight than what I would want you to do if we were doing this move here, or something like straight up like this. If we're here, what this position does is it gets our shoulder blades, because my elbows are out, it gets our shoulder blades sucked back toward the spine, kind of flat along the rib cage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, we'll try to work, and you might start with 5 pounds here, and you might say, well,
I was going to say 5 pounds is my absolute max. Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
But a daily, like this is a daily, right? Just getting those weights up there, letting your hips move a little bit. That's a great thing for a daily shoulder strengthener. Now, some of the other things that we do in class would be helpful, particularly if we're thinking about what we want to do with these shoulder blades here, would be to take a weight daily and do some of these pulls where we're really just getting a nice reach down, because that lengthens it all out, and we're pulling back. Nice reach down, lengthen it out, and pull back.
So you recommend that movement standing, leaning forward and having your front knee bent. But what about using a bench? Does it matter?
You could use a bench. You could definitely use a bench. Yeah, you could be like, I don't have one here right now, but yeah, I know what you mean. You can have your hand on there or kneel on the bench or something like that. Yeah.
So either way is good.
Either way is fine. Yeah. I kind of like, honestly, it's probably good if you're going to do that on a regular basis, which I think most of us would benefit from doing that on a regular basis. You might one day do it with a bench and another day do it standing, because this is going to be a different thing happening through your hip and your leg. And so this all can relate right back down to those knees. The stronger we are through, like, these are big muscles for a reason. Like they're long and they're thick and they're big because they're meant to help us. But what we end up doing is sitting on them from the time we're in kindergarten all the way through the rest of our lives. We just sit on them too much. It's just not what we're built for, right? So any chance we get, we want to say, well, think about a functional position for your shoulder, like people working in the garden, something like that. If we can picture, well, I wouldn't want to be standing like this for a very long period of time working in the garden, right? Because then I'm like resting on my lower back.
Also, rounding your spine is not good.
Not good, right? So I always want people to be able to feel safe and strong and comfortable in more of a strided position, because now your back, you've just taken almost all of the onus off of your back and you've put it into where the thick, strong muscles are in the butt and the thighs. Perfect. If we're reaching down like that. And that is also a shoulder exercise, right? Like these things all go together. Like we don't see Serena Williams hitting a ball like this, right? We see her stepping and reaching and using her whole body. That's her power comes from her body. And we sort of forget that. So in order to have healthy shoulders, we've got to have a healthy core. We've got to have strong hips. We've got to have all that. Like Nicole uses this analogy sometimes I hear her say this to people. If you don't have a strong foundation, it's like trying to fire a cannon from a canoe. Like it's not going to work. It's going to
That's a
blow the
great
canoe
analogy.
over. Yeah.
Completely.
So we want to think about how do we, so the both moral of this shoulder story is integration over isolation.
That makes total sense to me.
Okay.
Now, back to the issue of the weights. If I start with 5, I should do like 20 reps.
I would try 20 reps. Yeah.
And
I think that would be a good number.
Or until fatigue, one set.
You could go to
sets.
fatigue, not pain, but you could go to, oh man, these 5-pounders are feeling more like 20s right now. I think I'm done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And if you
and then
can
after a week,
Mm-hmm.
after a week, start inching up? Or shall I wait until it's just not tiring me anymore?
Yeah. I mean, if you can do that 50 times and you're not feeling any source of, you could just keep going, then you probably need to up the weight.
Sounds great. I'm excited now. I'm so happy because I thought you were going to tell me that I needed to stop, and I don't want to stop because I'm starting just to feel powerful and strong and proud of myself. Like I've, never had any muscle definition, and I don't want to stop.
No, and like we can absolve a lot of pain issues with strength, but it has to be integrated strength, not isolated
Makes
strength.
Great sense. And I also like the idea of using my butt.
Yeah, it's there. We got to use
got
it.
Got one. Yeah. And after you stop recording, I'll tell you what kids used to call me when I was in college.
Oh, well,
but I won't say it while you're recording. All right.
Oh, I'm going to stop recording right now. So, all right. So,
curious, huh?
I am curious. In the 10 and 10 series too, that you all have access to, there are some, there's a few that are really geared towards shoulder health, and there's one, I think, Mrs. T spine, I think I called it that for some reason, but thoracic spine, geared more toward the thoracic spine. And I think there could be a whole nother half hour or however long we want to talk about the thoracic spine. And I didn't really touch on that today, but specifically, but a mobile thoracic spine, which is from here to here, it's the 12 vertebrae between the neck and the low back. Those get locked down from gravity and hunching. And what those vertebrae are designed to do are to rotate and to side bend. But if we're bent over, we block the rotation and the side bending capabilities of that thoracic spine, and our shoulders cannot function fully without movement through the thoracic spine.
What do you mean by side bending? Can you show me?
So, yeah. So, okay. So the way so the vertebrae stack, right? One on top of the other. And they have like little feet that come down off of them, little bony feet. So that's a facet. And so they come from the top and they come from the bottom. In our lumbar spine, we have facet joints so this is the top lump vertebrae, this is a bottom vertebrae. The facet joints are upright like this, and they meet here. And so that they're on either side like this. They're on the left and the right side. And they're there to protect the lumbar spine from the individual vertebrae rotating too much. It's a bony blockage because
it's like a stop. Yeah.
It's a stopgap. It's a protective mechanism in the bone. And once we slide up to where the ribs start attaching, those are the thoracic vertebrae. Those have a bony attachment from our rib cage that gives that part of the spine more stability. So then what happens is those facet joints, they no longer are like this in the thoracic spine, they're flatter and they allow rotation.
Oh, cool.
And that's because they have the stability coming from whatever designed us knew that because there was no other bony attachment for those lumbar vertebrae, they had to have more protection in the way that those bones sit together. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Because we can't have vertebrae rotating like this. That would be a disaster.
No.
They have to go generally together in the same direction. Okay.
Very cool.
So you asked about the side bending of the lumbar spine. So if this is my spine here and I bend this way, then what's happening is I'm getting a side bend like that, and I'm getting a side bend like that. Okay. So like here and here.
Gotcha.
And so what that does is that kind of compresses the space on this side, but it opens up the spaces on this side, and vice versa. You gotta
do both sides.
Yeah, have to do both sides. And we're such one hand, one side dominant beings that we tend to have an asymmetry in that movement, right? It doesn't mean that we can't go the other way, but we have a much of a tendency because of our one side dominance to rotate more this way, say, side bend more this way than we do here, because this is awkward for me. I'm not left-handed. I'm not going and doing this over here that much, right? That type of thing.
I can
those
see
spaces are where all the nerves come out. Go ahead.
Gotcha. I was going to say I have huge definition here for the first time on my right side, but on my left side, you have to look a lot harder, and I feel like a lobster, with a dominant claw. So I'm trying to strengthen. And this is the side.
We are like lobsters, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the side that is going to be bothering you most likely.
That's the side that's hurting. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And also, the work that we do in class with the biceps is really important too for shoulder health. But again, we don't do this, right? We might do some, when we're actually using our biceps, we're probably pulling something, we're probably lifting something like this. But that's why we're always making sure that the rest of the body is coming along with the biceps.
Not just for balance, but for strength and integration.
Right. I mean, I could name 10 reasons why we would do this. One is balance, one is integration, one is pelvic floor, one is core stability. Like, it's innumerable.
That's awesome.
Okay.
In terms of the side bend, I learned how to do a yoga pose called the triangle. Because I don't bend very much from that side. And it's supposed to be one of the poses that's very good for you for osteoporosis.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I never thought I could do it. And I learned how to do it. And boy, that's cool. So
yeah,
what
that's
you're
a good
doing
move
with us in class is helping. And I got taught by someone who was trained, so I am not hurting myself.
Right.
And I can't believe I can really do it. It's so awesome.
It's awesome. It's so much we can do, right? Like,
Yep.
Our strength is not static. Our wellness is not a state of being. It's an action. Like, we have to take action in order to keep our balance and improve our balance, to improve our strength, to improve our mobility. Like, we can't just think about it. It's not a static state. But the more we do in all these different directions, it just affects our bodies in such a positive way. Like, even in terms of stress and anxiety, like, the best way to sort of close an anxiety loop, which we're in almost all the time, right? We're just in these like dormant states of anxiety about this and that, right? But physiologically, the best way, like, we have to kind of close that loop, or our bodies keep putting out the cortisol, they keep putting out the hormones that we used to need to run away from the lion, right? Because that's what real stress and anxiety was, a real threat to our lives. But now we just have it kind of coursing through us all the time. And those hormones are there. They're coming in to feed the muscle. Like, that's why we get tense when we're nervous. Like, the muscles are ready to react because those are the messages they're getting from those hormones. And so if we can create a really regular practice of physical activity and movement, then we can let those hormones do what they need to do for those muscles, and it can help close that loop of anxiety.
I'm hearing Yoda say, think but do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Cool.
I'm with you
This is
on that.
great, Robin. So cool.
Good. All right.
And I
I'm
feel
gonna sign
so
off from the recording
comforted that I
now.
don't have to stop. I was afraid I was going to have to
Right.
stop.
There's
like the
very
opposite.
few people or cases or situations that stopping is the right answer. Very, very few.
I'm
Yeah.
really excited and I'm very grateful.
Good. All right. I'm going to turn the recording off.